Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. The Afghan Interior Ministry says 27 people have been killed and 29 others wounded in a gun attack on a ceremony in Kabul. It is the first such attack on the capital since the US and the Taliban signed the peace deal last week. The event was being attended by several high-profile officials, including Chief Executive Abdullah. They managed to escape unharmed. The Taliban have denied the responsibility for the attack. President Ashraf Ghani said it is a crime against humanity. Pakistan's Foreign Office has also condemned the attack. Meanwhile, the Taliban say they have killed 8 Afghan policemen in an attack on a security post in the northern Balkh province. Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid says 7 others were wounded in the overnight attack in the Nehr Shahi district. The fighters said they seized ammunition and weapons in the raid. Kabul has neither confirmed nor denied the claim. This is the second such attack by the Taliban after signing the Doha deal with the US last month. Ashraf Ghani and Chief Executive Abdullah have announced to hold parallel swearing-in ceremonies as future president of the country. The Election Commission declared Ghani the winner of September 2019 polls 5 months after the elections amid accusations of electoral fraud. But Abdullah rejected the results, saying he has won the majority and will form an inclusive government. The Kabul government says preparations for President Ghani's oath-taking ceremony were completed and the event will be held on March the 9th. Meanwhile, Abdullah's office says he will assume the role of president on the same day. The oath ceremony was scheduled for last month, but it got delayed after the US expressed concerns that the political turmoil may jeopardize their peace deal with the Taliban. Washington has backed Ghani's victory in the elections. For more on this, we are joined by Hamdullah Hamdard, the analyst from Kabul, Afghanistan. Thank you for your time. How will this power struggle between Ashraf Ghani and Abdullah impact the US Taliban peace deal, especially after the apprehensions surrounding today's attack on the ceremony being attended by Abdullah?
I believe there will be no parallel government. Dr. Mohammad Ashraf Ghani will take oath on next Monday in the presidential palace of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. And once he takes oath, then this game of election is completely over. Dr. Abdullah might become part of the Ashraf Ghani's government in the future, but he will not be sharing any power like he did in the National Unity Government. And this resistance is just for gaining some power in the next government so that he is not left out, because he has got like around 39% of the total votes that were eligible. So it's only a struggle for his entry in the next government, and there will be no other crisis. And I believe that once they both are in the government, that government is led by Ashraf Ghani, then the government will be able to make a coordinated delegation for the peace talks with the Afghan Taliban.
Mr. Hamdard, the Taliban say they have killed 8 Afghan policemen in an attack on security post in the Nehr Shahi district of northern Balkh province today. With the Taliban attacks on the Afghan security forces, do you see the Ghani administration going ahead with the prisoner exchange promised by Washington?
There is one point everybody should know. Taliban have agreed in the deal that they will release 1,000 Afghan security forces, whether they are our national army forces or police or any intelligence forces and etc. Taliban do not have 1,000 security forces in their presence with them. So they are attacking now. They're trying to complete that number of the military forces with them. At the moment, Taliban do not have 1,000 military forces in their presence. And that's the only reason, that's why they have increased their attacks on the national security forces of Afghanistan, to complete that 1,000 number. However, the Afghan government has more than 5,000 Talibans in their presence, and this exchange is not implementable at the moment.
That was Hamdullah Hamdard, the analyst from Kabul, Afghanistan. Thank you for your time. And now moving on to Tunisia, where 5 policemen have been wounded in a suicide attack outside the US embassy in Tunis. Police said the attacker blew himself up after he was stopped from entering the embassy. In a tweet, the US embassy urged people to avoid visiting the area. Tunisia's tourism sector is highly vulnerable to militant incidents. Scores of visitors were killed in militant attacks on a beach resort and a museum in 2015. Moving on to the US, which says it is encouraged by an agreement on a ceasefire reached between Moscow and Ankara. Earlier, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan agreed on a ceasefire in Syria's Idlib after a 6-hour meeting in Moscow. The State Department said the US is hopeful that the truce will help de-escalate tensions in Syria's Idlib. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has also expressed hope that the latest ceasefire will end fighting across Syria. After the meeting in Moscow yesterday, Erdogan said both Turkey and Russia will work to make the ceasefire in Idlib a lasting one. Erdogan said the two countries will ensure the aid reaches the Syrians in need. Putin said he has agreed to continue working with Turkey on Syria as per the Astana format.
As a result of our negotiations, we have agreed on a joint document which will be read by the foreign ministers. It includes the solutions which I and the Turkish President Mr. Erdogan developed during today's consultations, which lasted for over 6 hours.
Turkey and the EU have continued to antagonize each other over Syrian refugees problem. Ankara, which already hosts nearly 4 million migrants, says it cannot handle another wave of asylum seekers stemming from the Syrian civil war. Thousands of displaced Syrians are stranded at the border with Turkey. This report has the details.
Syrian migrants in thousands are camped at the buffer zone between Turkey and Greece. Thick barriers obstruct their access to Europe. Turkey wants European countries to share the migrant burden, accusing them of trampling migrants' rights. The war-weary displaced Syrians have no place to go, but they still hold on to hope of entering Europe.
We have been waiting for you. Just give us a permission, please. A permission, for God's sake. For Christ's sake. For Christ's sake. We just need to cross the border peacefully. Peacefully.
According to International Organization for Migration, more than 13,000 people gathered along the border. Rain and chilled winds have compounded the misery for displaced Syrians as they are struggling to find a shelter.
All we hope for now is to go back to our country. We don't want to be humiliated and embarrassed like this. We just want to go back home, because when you leave your country, you become humiliated.
The Turkish Red Crescent has provided bags of food, water, basic shelter, and medical support to hundreds of asylum seekers.
We are witnessing many violations of the human rights, many violations of the migration rights. And we are expecting and claiming to protect their international rights.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkish leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan have agreed on a ceasefire in Syria's Idlib. Only time will tell if this would contribute to resolving the complex issue of Syrian refugees.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad says the US Middle East peace plan, the so-called deal of the century, is a stillborn plan. In an interview, al-Assad said Washington's Middle East proposition was made only in time for the next US elections. The Syrian president said those elections will be held at the end of this year, so the idea is meaningless. Assad pointed out that the states and the governments, even those allied with America and Israel, have rejected the plan. Speaking on Syria, Assad said several foreign companies have found ways to invest in Damascus despite Western sanctions. In India, the Uttar Pradesh police have put up several pictures of the anti-citizenship law protesters across Lucknow city. Risking their safety, UP police also unveiled names and residential addresses on the billboards. Police allege individuals identified on the signposts incited violence in the city. Many of the accused mentioned in the hoardings were earlier granted bail by a local court. Parts of India, including the capital New Delhi, have seen violent protests over the citizenship law, which discriminates against Muslim minorities. 47 protesters were killed during last week's riots in Delhi. Moving on to China, where for the first time, no cases of new coronavirus have been reported in Hubei province, outside the capital of Wuhan, where the disease originated. China's National Health Commission says all 126 new cases in the province were in Wuhan. Elsewhere in the world, the fatalities continue. Details in this report.
The new coronavirus has infected over 97,000 people in more than 80 countries. In China, 143 new cases have been reported, with 30 new deaths, taking the toll to 3,042. Britain and Switzerland reported their first deaths from the outbreak, while Bosnia and South Africa confirmed their first cases. The World Health Organization has warned that several countries are not doing enough to fight the outbreak.
We are concerned that some countries have either not taken this seriously enough or have decided there is nothing they can do. We are concerned that in some countries, the level of political commitment and the actions that demonstrate that commitment do not match the level of the threat we all face. This is not a drill.
Saudi Arabia has reopened the Great Mosque in Mecca after it was closed for sterilization. The kingdom also suspended the year-round Umrah pilgrimage. Meanwhile, Salvador's health workers are applying disinfectant at the international airport in an effort to head off the novel coronavirus.
This liquid is to be applied as protection against bacteria, viruses, fungi, and certain elements that may at some point generate complications. It is also important to emphasize that it is effective against coronavirus.
Canada has announced 9 new cases, bringing the national total to 45. In the US, Congress has voted for an $8.3 billion emergency funding package to fight the coronavirus as the death toll rises to 12.
Iran has reported 17 more deaths from the new coronavirus, raising the death toll to 124. The health ministry says the total number of patients jumps to over 4,747 after another 1,000 people diagnosed positive. A few key Iranian officials have also lost their lives after suffering from the coronavirus. Among the latest is the advisor to Iran's foreign minister, Hussein Sheikhul Islam. All schools and universities will be closed until 20th of March. Saudi Arabia has slammed Iran for granting Saudi citizens entry amid the coronavirus outbreak. In a statement, the foreign ministry urged Tehran to reveal the identities of all the Saudi nationals who had visited since the start of February. Citing an official source, the statement accused Iran of allowing Saudi citizens entry to its territories without stamping their passports. It says Iran acted irresponsibly, which makes tracking virtually impossible. The ministry said the citizens will be subjected to law forbidding travel to Iran if they don't declare their visits in 48 hours. Saudi Arabia has reported 5 cases of the COVID-19. 4 of them were citizens who had recently visited Iran. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The City of London Corporation has revoked an honour granted to Aung San Suu Kyi over the treatment of minority Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar. Elected representatives on the body running London's historic centre and financial district voted to revoke the freedom of the city granted to Suu Kyi 3 years ago. Officials said the decision reflects the city corporation's condemnation of humanitarian abuses in Myanmar. The move comes after Suu Kyi's appearance at the International Court of Justice in The Hague in December. Suu Kyi defended Myanmar at the highest UN court against allegations of rape, arson and mass killings of Rohingya Muslims. In January, the ICJ ordered Myanmar to prevent the genocide of Rohingya people in Rakhine. The EU says serious differences remain between the bloc and the UK after the conclusion of the first round of trade talks. The bloc's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, said difficult issues have to be resolved, but a good agreement for both the sides is still possible. He said competition rules, police cooperation and deal enforcement remains contentious. Brussels insists on keeping EU standards as a reference point in the trade agreement, but London calls it a dynamic alignment by another name. Both the sides set out their respective positions in opposing strategy documents last month.
In this first round, the British tell us that they always have this ambition of a high standard as we have it ourselves, but there are two difficulties. The British do not want to translate these commitments into a joint agreement, nor do they want appropriate mechanisms to ensure respect of it on both sides.
Talks move to London later this month for the second round. Now moving on, a Virgin Media database breach has affected 900,000 people as their data was left unsecured and accessible online for 10 months. The company says the breach was not due to a hack or a criminal attack, but because the database was incorrectly configured. It said the data did not include any passwords or financial details. The firm was alerted to the problem after it was spotted by an independent security researcher. Virgin Media Chief Executive Luciola said the company immediately solved the issue by shutting down access. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has accused the opposition of trying to destabilize the country, calling it unacceptable. At a meeting with the leaders of Russia's Federal Assembly, Putin said the government needs to guarantee that the country develops further. The president said Russia should return to the 1990s and efforts should be made to stabilize the government. He said many members of the assembly witnessed the events of the 1990s and he hopes nothing like that will happen in Russia. In the 1990s, Russia went through an enormous economic, social and political shock. The state attempted to rapidly adjust to the global economy after the end of the Soviet Union. Azerbaijan says one of its soldiers was killed by Armenian forces on a border village in Kazakh province. Azerbaijan's State Border Service said the soldier was killed in a sniper attack. Officials said the Armenian attack at the line of contact violated a ceasefire between the two countries. They said the Armenian military and the political leadership are responsible for this attack. Azerbaijan and Armenia remain in dispute over the Nagorno-Karabakh region since 1991 after the Soviet Union was dissolved. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, Minsk group formed to broker a peaceful solution to the conflict, has not reached any results yet. In India, 13 people have been killed after a car rammed into a SUV on a highway near the southwestern district of Tumakuru. Police say 5 others were injured in the accident, which happened when the driver lost the control. Officials say the car was approaching on the wrong side of the highway. They said people traveling in the SUV were from Hosur in Tamil Nadu. Police say they have opened an investigation. In Mexico, conflict fueled by the drug trade has left tens of thousands of people in secret unmarked graves. The families of these missing persons say the authorities have taken little action over the issue. One group of activists has turned to drone technology to address the problem themselves. More in this report.
Mexico is one of the most violent countries in the world. Since 2006, an escalating drug war between rival cartels has resulted in the deaths of over 115,000 people, as well as the disappearance of at least 60,000 others, most of whom end up in unmarked graves.
These are places where members of organized crime groups hid bodies of kidnapped and murdered people. Normally, we come to these places to search and locate human remains.
Desperate for closure, one group of parents affected by this tragedy are using drones to find as many of these graves as they can. They say northern Mexico has seen so much carnage over the years, its entire landscape is changing because of these mass burial sites.
We compare drone images with photographs from previous years and we can see the differences in the land today. Discoloration changes in the earth, constructions, mounds of stones or dirt.
This is a dangerous job. Not only do these people risk drawing the wrath of ruthless drug cartels, but also the Mexican police and military, who have often used extrajudicial methods in the country's long war on drugs. Most tragically of all, none of this has been able to put a dent in the growing power of these criminal groups.
European European markets have fallen sharply as the coronavirus outbreak continues to rattle global economic activity. Frankfurt's DAX and CAC 40 in Paris have lost over 2% each. London's FTSE 100 is trading nearly 2% lower after Capita stocks slid 8%. The Cineworld shares also fell about 7.5%. In Asia, Nikkei 225 led the losses, closing over 2.5% after shares of index heavyweight SoftBank Group plunged over 6%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng lost over 2% after China Eastern Airlines slipped about 4%. Seoul's Kospi also lost over 2% after airline ANA Holdings fell nearly 4%. Shanghai Composite lost over 1%. Meanwhile, international Brent crude oil prices lost nearly 2% over fears of dampening global demand. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.